Thank you, Madam President. We've just listened to Senator Portman, and you're hearing others of us on the Republican side of the aisle talk about the elevated levels of spending and how our Democratic colleagues have seemed to lose touch with the American people. This is something that appears to have happened at lightning speed. It really began on the very first day of the Biden administration. It started with the stroke of a pen and a stream of executive orders. On day one, President Biden made a decision that he would weaken our border, and with that stroke of a pen, he destroyed hundreds, thousands of good-paying union jobs right in the middle of a pandemic. And that was by eliminating the Keystone Pipeline. With every decision, he has made it abundantly clear that he came back to Washington not to serve this country, but to advance an agenda pushed by the most radical left wing of the Democratic Party. That being said, the White House has a problem because the American people have figured out what they are up to. And as I have been home for the past couple of weeks, I have talked to Tennesseans from every political division. They're Democrats, Republicans, independents. They're unaffiliated. They're concerned citizens. And it bothers them what they're seeing from this White House. How could they not have, after seeing Senate Democrats spend $1.9 trillion on coronavirus relief, that spent just 9% of that price tag on testing and healthcare jobs? If that didn't do it, President Biden surely tipped them off when he nominated a Health and Human Services Secretary with no health care experience, zero, and a Homeland Security Secretary who believes that we should have unsecured borders. You cannot make this up. People are astounded with this. So when people back home in Tennessee saw President Biden's latest proposal for a $2 trillion so-called infrastructure bill, they weren't particularly shocked to see that very little of this legislation has to do with infrastructure. Just 3 months into the new administration, and already they know this is just another vehicle for the left's wish list. The most frustrating thing about it is that Tennesseans have repeatedly told me that a smart, targeted plan to fund infrastructure improvements would make a tremendous difference in local communities and in our state. They support that type of investment. They want to see that. Roads, bridges, waterways, highways, broadband, airports. They're for that. What they don't support is an administration that repeatedly promises one thing and then chooses to do the opposite. Just like last month's over-the-top spending bill, this month's multi-trillion-dollar boondoggle isn't just a waste of taxpayer dollars, it's a missed opportunity to rebuild parts of our economy that were struggling to keep up before the pandemic hit. Here's a number for your talking points. Less than 6%. And what is less than 6%? Madam President, that is the amount, that's the percentage of this $2 trillion bill that actually goes to infrastructure projects. Less than 6%. Tennesseans are asking me, how could this possibly happen? We've been talking about having an infrastructure bill now for about 3 years. And you bring a bill forward, the Democratic leadership does, and less than 6% goes to infrastructure. Now, this sounds like a familiar tactic. Redefine your standards, put less than 10% of your funding toward your stated purpose, then throw the rest into yet another handout for projects that would not stand a chance. They wouldn't have a snowball's chance of receiving public support on their own, much less 60 votes here in this chamber. President Biden's American Jobs Plan ignores rural Tennesseans who have to navigate floodplains to get to work or to get to school. It bypasses crumbling bridges they can't avoid. But it sure does pay a lot of attention to Green New Deal policies that were non-starters even before Speaker Pelosi lost ground in the House. Climate change studies and union payouts take precedent over roads, bridges, ports, airports, and waterways. In fact, this absurd scheme spends more taxpayer money on electric cars than on all of those things combined. Yes, you heard me correctly. This so-called infrastructure bill spends more money, more of your hard-earned tax dollars on electric cars than on all of the roads, bridges, highways, ports, airports, and waterways. That is correct. Another day, another power grab, made worse by job-destroying corporate tax increases that will put American companies at a global disadvantage. It's no wonder Democrats have been working overtime to stretch the definition of infrastructure past the point of reason. These days, entire White House press briefings rely on the idea that the definition of infrastructure will continue to evolve. As they say, it's going to evolve to make it include whatever the Democrats decide that it should include. It's a time-honored liberal trick that has run its course. They can tweet that lie every day for the next 4 years if they choose. But here in the real world, we're dealing with an economy still in recovery, major industries in crisis, and millions of families who are working terribly hard and long hours to just make ends meet. What we're seeing here isn't just a disconnect. This is an administration attempting to impose their socialist vision on a country that cannot sustain the cost. To my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I want to be clear. That vision of America that you have invented to fulfill this purpose does not exist. It's time to come up for air and talk a little reality. I know it's a popular thing here in Washington to claim that elections have consequences. But on your first day back in power, the Democratic Party got together and marched right across the line that separates consequences from punishment. Punishment. That's what they're all about. I would also encourage my Democratic colleagues to remember that when they do this, when they put together these trillion-dollar handouts for radical special interest, political pain for their opponents isn't the only result. They are punishing their neighbors, their friends, communities that are in their states. They're making life harder, much more difficult for local businesses and small business manufacturers. And they're exposing our weaknesses to our adversaries. I will tell you, Madam President, if President Biden and the majority leader shove yet another blank check through this chamber, they are going to find out in a hurry, I really do believe, how little the American people have to give for their leftist agenda. I yield the floor.